Okay, good morning. We're learning this Lila Nishmas Mindel Mariam Bas Kamen Reuven and Hashem Shabbat Aliyah. We are going to just go back to the middle because it's we stopped kind of in the middle of something. So we're going to go back to 143b2. There's a Bryce that was quoted there. It's a Tanya. It's like all the way, like the last few words on that page, 143b2. Or if you're on the Gemara side, it's like there's a little hay there. There's a Rambam hay, like the Mishpat, the Tanya Zaysim Shemashach. You see that? Everyone see that? Zaysim? It's like in the middle of that paragraph, the last paragraph. Okay. Titania. Okay, so again, we've had this discussion about liquids that come out of fruit. Do we see liquid that, so again, there is this concept that liquid coming out of fruit. We saw that Rabbi Yehuda, who is the more lenient view, he agreed to the Rabbanan when liquid came out of olives and grapes. Whatever your intention was, we treat that as liquid, and therefore we don't touch that on Shabbos. Any liquid that came out, we see that we don't touch that on Shabbos, whereas okay, so that's one of the. So let's see the Bryce inside. Zaysim shemashach be'em shemen va'anavim shemash bechem yain. If you have olives, which oil came out of it on Shabbos, or grapes from which wine, grape juice came out of it on Shabbos, v'chnisa me la'ocha ben lamashkin. Whether the person originally stored it for food or whether the person originally stored it for liquid, it doesn't matter. Hayot ben aser. What comes out is aser. So just to explain that a little bit, what's going on over here is that what comes out is aser, meaning that what we're talking about over here is a prohibition of extracting something, like there's something that is embedded in something else. There's two things there, okay? So there's something called mefarik, okay? That's the biblical prohibition. And so you have something that's captured into something else, and you extract it, so then you've taken something out of something else. In that case, you're going to be chayav, okay? So since we treat olive oil and grape juice or wine as an entity onto its own, so what we see was that there was grapes, and there was something embedded inside of it, and we took that something out of it. It's two separate entities. Everyone's going to agree, since it's two separate entities, that whatever came out on Shabbos on its own, it's this new entity, and that is therefore an expression of mefarik, and therefore you cannot drink that liquid that came out on Shabbos. It was, you had olives, and now you have olive oil. You had grapes, and now you have wine. It's two separate things, and therefore it's a full expression of mefarik. You cannot drink the liquid that comes out. However, turn the page. Tusim, grapes, shemashach mehem mayim, where the liquid came out on Shabbos. Rimonim shemashach mehem yain, or pomegranates, which the liquid came out on Shabbos. Okay, v'chnisa la'ochlin. If a person set it aside for food, hayotz ben mutter, then what comes out is permitted. Why? Because we treat that came out of it, we treat that as it's just pomegranate juice. It's just like, sorry, that's not even a good use. It's just, it's not like a separate thing that came out. It basically it's the same thing. It wasn't like it's not like there's a pomegranate, now there's pomegranate wine. It wasn't like there's strawberries, now there's strawberry juice. It's like, okay, there's some liquid came out of the strawberries. I mean, I think that's the way we would look if you had strawberries that were stored. The other day, I was traveling all day, and I had like some fruit sitting in a bag, okay, and at the end of the day, when I had like the bag was like packed with liquid. It was packed with liquid. That's not like, I wasn't making strawberry juice, it's just like, hey, it's the liquid that came out of it. We don't see that as its own entity, and therefore, if I set it aside, if I put it in that thing because I wanted to snack on fruit later, then it's going to be mutter. You're allowed to drink it because it's a strawberry and some juice came out. Lemashkim vilastam. If a person put it in a basket, in a Tupperware and whatever, in like some container, in order to make juice out of it, or, and this word listam is going to be the word we're going to discuss for a little bit, or a person just put it with no intention. A person just put it in a box, no intention whatsoever, then hayotze and aser. Then the liquid that comes out of it is prohibited. Why? Because then we see it, certainly if you put it away to make liquid out of it, to make pomegranate wine out of it. Okay, so if that was your intention, then we treat it as pomegranate wine, and therefore you had pomegranates, and now you have pomegranate wine, that is mefarik, okay? Those are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. The Chum are more stringent. They hold when it comes to strawberries or pomegranates, even if your intention was to set it aside for eating, at the end of the day, we treat pomegranate juice as a separate entity, and therefore what comes out is going to be aser. Okay? So far, so good. That's kind of a review of what we saw. Now we're gonna dig into one line in this brisa. The brisa told us that Rabbi Yehuda holds savar Rabbi Yehuda stam aser. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda in the brisa, and we're questioning this. Does Rabbi Yehuda really hold that when a person puts strawberries or pomegranates away with no purpose, then we treat the liquid as a liquid? In other words, right? That's what came out of his statement. It wasn't. There's. If you put it, Rabbi Yehuda held, if you put it away for eating, then we just treat it as it's a strawberry with like some liquid, but we don't treat it as like juice. If you put it away to make juice, then we treat it as strawberry juice. But if you put it away for no specific purpose, stam, then we also treat that as putting it away for juice. Those are the words we're going to be questioning, because, so basically what we see from that is Rabbi Yehuda holds that when I put something away for no intended purpose, then we treat its juice as actual liquid, as juice, as liquid. I need to think of better words over here. As juice and not liquid, right? I think we'll say it that way, right? We treat it as juice, meaning like something you'll drink, as opposed to just moisture, as opposed to just liquid, right? Ask the Gemara, that cannot be. That's not. We learned in the Mishnah. So just a little introduction to this Mishnah. We have a concept that for something to become tameh, for something to become susceptible to tumah, rather, it has to encounter liquid. Okay, so anything in the world, for anything to be susceptible to tumah, it has to have had liquid. So we specifically, let's talk about grain. Okay, if you harvest grain, okay, so maybe it rains on the grain before, that doesn't matter. I harvest grain, it's only if that grain now touches, it comes into contact with liquid, then after that contact is now going to be susceptible to tumah. Okay, these are not halachas that we normally think about because we don't really deal with that type of susceptibility to tumah nowadays. But the point is that if something comes into contact with one of a number of liquids, then it's going to be mekabel tumah, then it's susceptible to tumah. And our mission over here is going to talk about certain types of liquids. Do those liquids trigger a susceptibility to tumah or not? Okay, so it says the Mishnah. The milk of a woman, okay, will cause susceptibility to tumah, whether it came out because she wanted it to come out, or whether it came out on its own. Sometimes milk comes out on its own. That milk, no matter what, is considered milk. It's considered milk, and therefore, if that milk comes into contact with grain, let's say, that grain is going to be susceptible to tumah because we treat that milk as something which is a liquid. However, chala behema eina matama el ratzon. The chachamim in this brisa say that the milk of an animal is only considered a liquid if it came out with intention. In other words, and we'll talk about the owner's intention. If the owner wanted it to come out, meaning the owner is milking it, or the owner wants actual milk, then we'll say it's mekaba. Then then that milk is called milk, and therefore is causes if that milk comes into contact with grain, it generates susceptibility to tumah. But if it came out not with the owner's intention, he didn't want it to be coming out, he wasn't milking it for milk, then it's not. It doesn't cause tumah. Okay. However, Rabbi Kiva disagrees. Rabbi Kiva. Kal v'chomer. This makes no sense. There should be a kal v'chomer to say that the animal's milk. Okay, Rabbi Kiva's basic argument in this brisa is that he says animal's milk, whether it came out on purpose or not on purpose, it should trigger susceptibility to tumah. Because milk is milk. He holds the difference between l'ratzon and shelo ratzon should not exist. Okay, so what is? But he's going to argue with the chachamim on their terms. Okay, so he says like this: kavachomer. There should be a kavachomer to prove you the chachamim wrong. Umachal of isha. When it comes to the milk of a woman, shena miyuchad elektanim, which is intended. Typically, intended only for children, mitam and l'ratzon shelo ratzon, and yet it causes susceptibility to tumah. Whether it came out deliberately or it came out not deliberately, whether it came out because she wanted it to come out or she didn't want it to come out. Chala behema, when it comes to animal milk, shemiyucha ben l'ktanim ben l'gdolim, which is something that's meant for both children and adults. Eino din shitam ben l'ratzon ben shelo l'ratzon. That is, for sure, we should treat that as milk. In other words, if something which is only for children, there we say that no matter what, we treat it as milk. So milk which is meant for both adults and children, i.e., it's more milk-like. We treat it more like milk because it's something which everyone drinks. Okay, shouldn't we say that whether it came out on purpose or not on purpose, it's still milk, right? His argument is that it's something which is much more milk-like, right, as opposed to just like treating it like a nothing, like treating it like liquid. Everyone drinks cow milk, and therefore it should be whether it came out on purpose or not. We should treat it like milk. So Amr Lo, the Chum counter, he says they say They say no. What the argument is going to be is that a woman's milk is going to be more stringent. Why? Because it's a woman's milk is going to a woman's milk that causes susceptibility to tumah that comes out even though she didn't intend for it to come out. But by a woman, there's another stringency, and that is shedam megaifasa tame, that a blood of her wound, not just a woman's wound, but there's a general rule that blood of a human being, okay, blood of a wound is going to cause susceptibility to tumah. If a man or a woman, gets a cut and that blood falls on grain, okay, then that grain is going to be susceptible to tumah. Okay, so yitame chalav behema. Okay, so therefore, a woman whose blood causes tumah, therefore we could say that therefore it's going to cause more stringency to her milk. Whereas by an animal, yitame chalav behema shelo l'ratzon, an animal's milk. that comes out against the animal's will or the owner's will, shedami gafasa tahar, and there the blood of a wound does not cause tuma. In other words, what we're saying over here is the Chacham are pushing back and saying you can't make a kal v'chomer, saying that animals' milk should be more machmer than human milk because both adults and children drink it, and therefore it's more milk-like. But the Chachamim point out that no, there is a major difference, because the woman's blood, meaning human blood, is more machmer than animal blood. And therefore, you can't learn a clean kal v'chomer and say, just like by animal, it's both by whether it came out, just like by humans, whether it came out on purpose or not on purpose, it's tameh. So for sure by an animal, no, there's no for sure, because humans have a certain stringency embedded into it, that the blood of a human is mitame. Whereas the blood of an animal, we're not going to get into the psukim right now, the blood of an animal, just trust me on this, the psukim learn it elsewhere, that the blood of an animal is not triggering tumah. With me? And the Chachamim point out, and just to explain what's the connection between blood and milk, just to explain a little bit deeper, the Chachamim point out that in some ways the blood, a woman's milk is treated as blood. Ultimately it's generated through the bloodstream, and therefore the Chachamim in some conceptually say that to some degree it's blood that obviously shifts dramatically, but they treat there's an intrinsic connection between the blood, blood of a person, and the milk that's generated, in the sense that it's generated from the body, and therefore it's not like apples and oranges. The blood, in as much as the blood of a human is more machmir, so too the milk of a human could be more machmir, and therefore don't learn anything to animals where the blood of an animal is tahar. With me? A little bit hard. Okay, Amalahan. So the Rekivas counters back. He says, no, I'm going to be more stringent by blood. By milk than blood. In other words, don't say that, we're going to make this milk and blood comparison, and therefore you're going to tell me that we should make that we're going to make this comparison. Okay, so this is not true. Shacholev l'refuah tameh. If a person milks a cow to get milk for medicine, then that milk is considered tameh. Vamak is the refuah tahar. But if a person causes blood of an animal to come out for therapeutic purposes, that blood is going to be tahar. So we see that milk is more stringent than blood. Okay, so therefore also when it comes to, so going back to Rabbi Kiva's ultimate argument, he says that milk that comes from an animal, whether it came out intentionally or unintentionally, I'm going to treat it as tameh. Right? Again, that's Rabbi Kiva's general point in this whole discussion. The Chachamim say, whereas it's true by humans, intentional, unintentional, we treat it as milk. But when it comes to animals, when it comes out intentionally, we treat it as milk. When it comes to intentionally, we treat it as milk. When it comes to unintentionally, we don't treat it as milk. Rabbi Kiva pushes back on, and he said, and what part of their counter to Rabbi Kiva was, milk and blood are the same, and therefore humans are different, animals are different. He says it's not true. He says that we see there's a big distinction between milk and blood, because when it comes to an animal, if I take milk for therapeutic purposes, it's tameh. If I take blood for therapeutic purposes, it's tahar, and therefore your whole blood milk argument is not a solid one. And here's now the key line that we're looking for. Amrlo, they say back to him, where you have a basket of olives or grapes, it'll show that you, Rabbi Kiva, your argument is wrong. What's Rabbi Kiva's ultimate argument? His ultimate argument is when something comes out unintentionally, we still treat it as a juice, like as a juice, right? He says when milk comes out unintentionally, we treat it as milk, right? As opposed to just water that comes out, as opposed to nothing. And they say, no, look, if you have a basket of olives and grapes, and liquid comes out, so the Chacham point out, shamashkim hayot mehem, liquid that comes out, liratzon tameim, if they were there with for the owner wanted them to come out, then we're going to say it's tameh. Shelo liratzon tahorim, if the owner did not want it to come out, then it is tahar. It does not generate susceptibility to tumah. Okay? So and therefore they say, look, you, Rabbi Kiva, are wrong. You want to say that anything that comes out, whether it's intentional or not intentional, is always going to generate susceptibility to tumah. But with grapes and olives, when it comes to tumah, meaning if you have a basket of olives or a basket of grapes and liquid comes out, okay, so when in regards to laws of tumah, if liquid comes out, shelo l'ratzon, not intentionally, everyone agrees that liquid that comes out, it does not generate tumah. And therefore, you see that don't try to say that, no, there's no difference between intentional and unintentional. We see very clearly there's a case that everyone agrees when it comes to olives and grapes, if the liquid comes out unintentionally, it does not generate tumah. Okay? What does that have to do with us? What to do with us is that ultimately, what's Rabbi Kiva and the Chacham arguing about? They're arguing about how do you treat unintentional liquid that comes out? Do you treat it like just oozing liquid, or do you treat it as a drink? Do you treat it as something substantial, right? And the Gemara now says one point further. My lav l'ratzon tenichale. When the Brisa said that if it comes out l'ratzon, it's tameh, that means that I want it to come out. Shelo l'ratzon, And therefore, when it says, I don't want it to come out, that means bistama. That means that I didn't have any intention. So what do you see? What you see is the following. Let's keep on reading. Olives and grapes, which are generally designated for squeezing. Okay, so olives and grapes, which are generally designated for squeezing. And we just came out saying that when a person had no intention, then I just put them away stam without any intention. Then we don't treat the liquid that comes out of them as anything. We treat it as liquid, not like juice, right? We just treat it as like just stuff that comes out, right? That's what we're saying. If I have no intention, then the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda both agree, that everyone agrees, that we saw in that last discussion, everyone agrees that liquid that comes out of them with no intention, then we treat it as nothing. So tusim v'rimonim delabnei schitaninu. So strawberries and pomegranates, which are not generally designated for squeezing, lo kol shekain, certainly any liquid that comes out of them, we should treat as nothing and not as an actual juice. Still with me? Right, you see the comparison, right? So basically what comes out, let's just review this one more time. What came out of the last discussion was olives and grapes. If a person just put them in, the simple implication of the brisa was that, what did the brisa say? The brisa said, if I put olives and grapes with intention for the juice to come out, I put them in a basket with intention for the juice to come out, then we treat the juice as substantial. We treat it as a juice, right? If I put them in stam, if I put them with no intention whatsoever, then the liquid that comes out of it is treated as nothing. It's just liquid that came out, right? So, and that's by olives and grapes, where the juice is substantial. So it's significant, I should say. So when it comes to tutim v'rimonim, when it comes to pomegranates and strawberries, if I just put them away stam without any intention, liquid comes out of it, we should treat as nothing. Insofar as we treat the juice that came out of the olives and grapes as nothing when I had no intention. So for sure, when it comes to pomegranates and strawberries, if I put them away and the liquid that comes out of it, I should treat it as nothing. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda, we shouldn't say. And the problem with that is that we just established today when we started that Rabbi Yehuda holds when I put the pomegranates and strawberries away stam without any intention, the liquid that comes out of it is considered a juice. And now we're saying liquid that comes out after stam should be considered a nothing. Right? So that's all based on a read of the brisa that we quoted. So the Gemara now rejects the read of the brisa that we just quoted. That was all based on how you interpret the words l'ratzon and shelo l'ratzon, intentional, not intentional. Now the Gemara says, no, you read it wrong. Lo, l'ratzon bistama, when the brisa said, when the Mishnah said, that everyone agrees that olive oil, that stuff that comes out of olives, stuff that comes out of grapes, is a liquid. When it said l'ratzon, it doesn't mean that I deliberately put it there. It just means bistama. It just means I was okay with it. I put it there with no intention. When it said shelo l'ratzon, and therefore when it said that the owner did not want it, degali adaite, when he made it very clear what his intention was, the Amar, as he said, lo nichali, I don't want liquid to come out. Okay, so what comes out of the brisa then, if we're rereading it, what the brisa is saying is, shelo l'ratzon, when I did not want it to come out, then it's going to be considered just a liquid. But if it's stam, if I just put it there with no statement whatsoever, then it is considered juice, and that is consistent with the view of Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so right now we're saying that whole question falls away, and what comes out of the brisa is that anything when it's just stam, when it's just I'm just doing it with absolutely no intention, then we do treat the liquid as juice, and that's consistent with Rabbi Yehuda's view. Okay, that's one way of reconciling. V'baisema, an easier answer, I think. Shani sali zeisim anavim. When you put olives or grapes into a basket, okay, is that a good way to capture the juice? That's a really dumb way to capture the juice, right? If you want to capture juice, you don't want to put it into a basket. You want to put it into something which is solid, right? The fact that you put it in an olive, you put it in a basket, basically by putting it there, that is unique. It's nothing to do with intentional versus unintentional. It's almost like you explicitly said, I don't care about the juice. And therefore, don't bring me a raya, don't bring me a proof from the case where I put it into a basket, because a basket is porous, and therefore things are going to come out, and therefore it's as if I said in that case, I don't care about it, and therefore any liquid that comes out, I am going to treat as liquid and not as juice when I just put it bistam, right? But in a scenario but don't bring me a proof to a case where I put tutim v'rimonim, strawberries or pomegranates in a sealed container, that's going to be very different, and therefore you have no question from that whole discussion. Okay? What do we learn from this whole thing? What we learn is that short amudim are not as easy as they look. Okay? That's the rule. Okay. Fine. Okay. Let's go further. Now it gets easier. Okay? Hold on tight. Okay. Ashkechan Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so we saw from the brisa we just quoted that Rabbi Yehuda demodi l'Rabbanan b'zeisim anavim. That Rabbi Yehuda agrees to the Rabbanan when it comes to olives and grapes. Fine. So we just established that from the brisa. However, Rabbanan demodi l'Rabbi Yehuda b'shar piras b'nalan. Where do we see that the rabbis, the Chachamim, agreed to Rabbi Yehuda. Again, Rabbi Yehuda was the more lenient view when it came to fruit, and when he said when you store you stored fruits for the sake of eating, then the liquid that comes out of the pomegranates and strawberries, when you stored it for eating, the liquid is mutter. When a liquid that comes out is mutter because those are not typical squeezing fruit. So we established from the Bryce above that Rabbi Yehuda agrees to Rabbanan when it comes to olives and grapes, that no matter what, the liquid that comes out of it is going to be problematic. You can't drink it on Shabbos. But where do we see anywhere that the Rabbanan agreed to Rabbi Yehuda that if I stored strawberries or grape or pomegranates for eating, then the liquid that comes out of it is mutter? So where do we see it? The Tanya we taught in the Brisa, and let's read these words carefully. Sochatin, you're allowed to squeeze. Okay, bifigin uvifrishin uvuzradin. You're allowed to squeeze plums, quinces, or sorb apples on Shabbos in order to drink their juices. Avalo berimonim, but not pomegranates. Okay, so then the Brisa just continues. It says Vishal Beis Menashe bar Menachem hayisochtim berimonim, and in the house of Menashe bar Menachem they would squeeze pomegranates during the week. So what do you learn from the fact they squeeze it during the week? What we're trying to prove is that it's common for pomegranates to be squeezed, right? Palm juice was popular before we thought. And is that how you pronounce it? Pom? I don't know, palm, right? Okay, so basically, bottom line is that we see that pomegranates were squeezed, and therefore it's considered a juice. But other things, plums, quinces, sorb apples, those you're allowed to actually squeeze on Shabbos. Okay, so what do you see from this brisa? That you see if you're that other juices, that other fruits, you're permitted to even go ahead and squeeze them for their juice. Okay, so certainly you're allowed to. What are we trying to prove over here? Sorry, what we're trying to prove, excuse me, I think I said it wrong. We're trying to prove is that everyone agrees to Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to non-tutim v'rimonim, when it comes to non-strawberries or pomegranates, that the liquid that comes out of it is going to be permitted. Okay, when the liquid that comes out of other fruit, the liquid is going to be permitted no matter what. Okay, so plums, quinces, that was one of the things that came out of Rabbi Yehuda's statements. And so where do we see that? So we see over here, you're allowed to squeeze them. And so the Gemara says, wait a second, what we're looking for is the Rabbanan agreed to Rabbi Yehuda. Mimai Rabbanan he. Who says this Bryce is Rabbanan? Dilma Rabbi Yehuda he. Maybe it's Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore we haven't proven anything. It doesn't say who the author of this Bryce is. The Gemara says, wait, V'tehavinam Rabbi Yehuda. So fine, you want to say it's Rabbi Yehuda, that's fine. Amar Deshamas Rabbi Yehuda, but what we're seeing in this Bryce is novel. Because when did we see anything? What did we hear from Rabbi Yehuda until now from our Mishnah? Yatzomei Atzman. When it comes out on its own. Do we find anywhere that you're initially allowed to squeeze it? Until now, our entire discussion was liquid that oozes out, just happens on its own. It's sitting in a container and liquid comes out. Did we ever see anywhere you're allowed to squeeze? So Elamayis lechel meimar. What do you want to say? Kevan dela b'nei schitaninu. It must be that since these fruits are generally not designated for squeezing, afilu lechatchila Rabbi Yehuda clearly, at the very least, Rabbi Yehuda, who's the more lenient view, is going to say that lechatchila, ideally, that you're allowed to squeeze them on Shabbos. And then once you say we're covering novel ground, then you could say afilu tim Rabbanan, even the Rabbanan, kevan dela b'nei schitaninu. Then the Rabbanan, we have no reason to assume the Rabbanan would disagree because we don't find any discussion about this. And now we're covering new ground. We're talking about fruit which are not generally squeezed, and we see at the very least Rabbi Yehuda saying you're allowed to squeeze them on Shabbos since it's not. We don't treat it as a liquid. Again, the whole premise of the whole issue is that since I treat the liquid that comes out as like a new entity, but we see Rabbi Yehuda now explicitly saying that no, you squeeze an apple juice is not a new entity, it's just apple stuff that comes out. So then once we find Rabbi Yehuda saying that, afilu tim Rabbanan, let's say the Rabbanan we have no reason to assume the Rabbanan disagree, and rather they will say, since it's not generally used for squeezing, afilu chatchila, even the chatchila be allowed to do so, shma mina Rabbanan he, so we see that it is the Rabbanan, or at least the Rabbanan would not disagree, shma mina, and that is indeed the case. Now, as I pointed out yesterday, this is only true in the ancient world. Nowadays, we're not really going to say this because apple juice is a thing. Everything is a thing. Every juice has its own juice that comes out of it. We treat it as a juice, and therefore this is only in a scenario in a world where no one's squeezing apples. If you would bring apple juice, back to ancient Babylon, everyone would think you're out of your mind. But nowadays, since it is considered a juice, it would actually be usher, and we will stop here. Have a great day.